Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Good, Communications Director from Title Track and the Clean Water Campaign. Really honored to be here this afternoon with Liz Kirkwood from Flow. And we'll be discussing water protection this afternoon and hope to have just kind of a informal conversation and give folks some opportunities to join the great work that's happening across the state and have some question and answers too. So before we start diving in here, why don't we just give a little personal intros of each of ourselves and how we got into the work. I find that that history and backstory is always so meaningful for myself to hear folks who are involved with activism or organizing, just to get some of that personal context and to really get to see how we all have a part to play. We're all bringing our unique experiences and our own skills and networks, and it's truly a time for all hands on deck. So love to turn it over to you, Liz, and give a little backstory of what brought you here.
Thanks, Chris. First off, I just want to say greetings to all of you. This is a hard space to interact because this is really one of my favorite weekends, and the day is absolutely glorious. I mean, I'd rather be outside in a tent having a conversation with you. So, but we are fortunate we can still continue on and connect. So I'm really grateful to always be part of these conversations. Gosh, when you talking about your background, there's, I agree. I love knowing where people are coming from and how they became interested in, work on protecting extraordinary places like the Great Lakes, of course. For me, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And so it seems like I might be the least likely candidate to be a Great Lakes defender and warrior, but I've spent my whole life around water, and I actually spent a lot of my childhood in the Chesapeake Bay with my grandparents, and I also have a real love for the mountains and wilderness, and spent my 20s and 30s out in the Rocky Mountain West, living in Arizona and going to law school in Oregon, living in California. And when you actually, I think that for me, the transformative moment of really knowing why I wanted to focus on water specifically was when I moved to Arizona when I was 22, right after college, and recognizing what a precious resource it was. It's really moving from a place of water abundance to water scarcity, kind of really turned on that new perspective of, this is something that is so precious. How can we even exist here in the desert? And for example, back in the 90s, it always bewildered me that any new development was not required to identify water sources that they were going to draw from. It was just kind of assumed, well, build it and they will come and the water will be there. But it's not the case. And I think that kind of was a huge turning point for me. Also living overseas, I lived in Brazil in college, in the Amazon, and also I lived in Southeast Asia, working for the U.S. government on water and sanitation issues. And those international perspectives also were always really tuned me into the importance of protecting water. So I'm going to stop there. And Chris, I want to hear your story.
Beautiful, Liz. Thank you. Yeah, such a different journey for me. I'm a relative newcomer to the water work and water protection community. Grew up in Indiana, small town Indiana, immersed in organizing activism culture, actually, with a lot of folks, longtime peace activists and then also dove into the local food, organic farming community once moved here with my partner to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Which reminds me, I know there have been many land acknowledgements throughout this weekend. I've heard several given already, but just wanted to acknowledge that I reside on historic and current Anishinaabe land, the land of Potawatomi, and appreciate so much this harvest gathering. The Bernard family, of course, all the volunteers, all the staff that make it happen, and all the intentionality that they bring to not only honor the artists, the musicians, but also those of us within organizing activist circles, as well as the local Native community. I have appreciated over the last 10, 12 years that I've been a part of the harvest community, seeing an evolution of consciousness with some of these topics, and how they've all just become more and more interwoven into the fabric of this community. So so much gratitude, as you said, Liz, just to find the adaptability right now to still be able to gather in community, even though these are such challenging times. So moving to Michigan really was transformative for me, to become more intimately connected with water, and then to be a part of this Earthwork community, and to really deepen my relationship and friendship with Seth Bernard. And a couple years ago, I was kind of at a transition in my own vocational pursuits, and had some time and energy on my hands, and just kind of pitched the open-ended question to Seth on what he had cooking, and see if he needed any support in his work, just about as he was ready to launch the Clean Water campaign in early 2018. And so that was perfect timing for me to get more involved in the work. And even though I didn't have much of the background with the kind of nuts and bolts of water activism, our effort was really to bring artistic sensibilities to support the work of folks like Liz and so many of the other activists within the state, to bring storytelling and to bring music, and to provide an on-ramp for artists and musicians to be a part of this work, and to see if we could be a part of that collaborative effort across the state to really bring these issues to the forefront. And felt like in 2018 we were overwhelmingly successful at really challenging candidates to take strong stands for water, and then of course to continue the work and allow citizens to be actively engaged in this work too. I found it so deeply moving. I come from a deeply spiritual family and culture background too. Find it so fascinating how water is just this connective issue for so many folks, so many spiritual traditions, faith traditions, as well as political persuasions can find common ground. We all want clean water. We all want safe water. We all want affordable water. And although we often differ on how to make that happen, there are possibilities of bridges to be built around this topic. So that's been really fascinating and inspiring to me to be engaged in this work. Great. So you have something you want to add there, Liz?
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. And I think, well, you reminded me is that, the Great Lakes hold a very dear place to me personally, because while, in my life, I've spent a lot of time living other places, my husband and I would always return to the Great Lakes. And, they're just an incredible place, of global significance. And the other thing I wanted to also just say is thank you for recognizing that these are the original native lands of the Anishinaabe peoples. And I also, if it's okay, I wanted to lift and honor up another water warrior and hero of all of ours who has passed, and that's Greg Reisick. And if it's okay, I might just read this poem that I wrote about him.
Oh,
that would try not.
That'd be beautiful, Liz.
I'll
Thank you.
try to keep it together here. Okay. Greg Reisick, beloved friend of the earth. Indomitable force you are, always speaking for the earth, speaking truths to power. You speak for the trees, the waters, the animals, the children, and their collective future to live in harmony on this small blue planet. Your voice is so strong, so clear. You sense outrage, and yet you remained measured and calm. You listen intently and write down every word, never missing a beat. You bring us in. You teach us that we must understand their motivations, their tactics, and their long-term strategies. You show us we must use our smarts, but also connect people to their hearts. This is how we win for Mother Earth. We thank you, dear friend of the earth. Your legacy is brilliant as we humbly seek to follow your example day by day.
Wow. Thank you so much, Liz. I never had the opportunity to meet Greg in person, but know his son Jeremy well, and actually crossed paths originally at Harvest. And I know Greg is a dear one to so many of my dear ones. So I've followed that news and that expression of grief and celebration of his work in life closely. Can you speak just a little bit more about the work that he did, the organization he was involved with? And I feel like there was a scholarship announced.
Yes. So Greg was a journalist and passionate advocate for all the waters and lands here, in northern Lower Michigan. He was a co-chair of NEMIAC, Northern Michigan Environmental Action Council, for many, many years. And NEMIAC now has honored him with a journalism award. And I should put that in the chat in a moment and share that information with everybody. It's true. Greg was part of our, monthly gatherings revolving around Line 5, and part of the Oil and Water Gel Mix Coalition, which is a very large collaborative coalition to stop Line 5 pumping oil through the heart of the Great Lakes and to prevent an oil spill. And, Greg was just so electric and such a incredible force for bringing everybody together, really focusing on what were those strategies to win. And he has, he's done that, protecting wetlands, addressing, highways to cut through very important conservation lands. And he's just continued to always be a voice for the water, a voice for the land. And, he was just such a kind person, just really so generous and loving. And, his family are they're just a testimony to, the kind of person he is. Sorry.
No. Thank you so much. I know that his memory and legacy live on in so many folks within the Harvest community. So it feels really appropriate to take some time here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we all continued to do this work in his honor. So. And
something that was lifted up by a friend in honoring and remembering him was just the ability to tell a story. And I feel like that's something I've learned so much in the last couple of years being engaged in this work, and more broadly speaking, just within, you know, activism and art for that matter, the power of telling your own story. And we all truly do have a water story to tell. I mean, it's in our bodies. It's where we were born. So anyways, thank you so much, Liz. I know that, I don't know if you're looking for that link or not. I know that I think the link for that could maybe be shared. Yeah, go ahead.
I found it. It's called the Greg Reisig Prize for Environmental Journalism, and I'm going to just drop in this link into the chat, and I hope it connects, because sometimes, it's if you just Google the Greg Reisig Prize for Environmental Journalism as part of NEMAC, there is a link to actually contribute to fund the award. So if you are so moved, it's a beautiful investment.
Great, thank you so much. I know the chat here on our Zoom isn't showing for the folks streaming, so I just copied it into the YouTube chat here right now.
Thanks,
Great.
Ben. Thanks, Chris.
So why don't we dig a little bit into the work that Flow is doing, the work Clean Water Campaign is doing. If there are any particular issues that you'd like to spotlight here, I guess just kind of run with it where you'd like to go, Liz.
Yeah, well, you know, as you said, there is so much to talk about in Michigan, and I think the starting point is to remember that water does unite us. And I know especially the work that Title Track did around the Clean Water Campaign was really, really important in terms of sharing and showing that unity through the storytelling, through the artistic connections. And also I do want to recognize again that the incredible role of artists in really connecting our hearts, because that is the way that the translation happens, where that you protect the places that you love, the things you believe in. And we also at Flow have, you know, really recognized that we have a program called Art Meets Water for that very purpose, because we understand that, you know, ultimately as humans, you know, water is life, and this is essential for all creatures, human, non-human. And I mean, just as background for folks who don't know about our work, but our mission is to protect these waters as a public good, as a resource. And that word becomes really problematic in a lot of ways, but these waters are here not just for us, but for the generations to come, very much along the seventh generation concept. And we're so fortunate to have a parallel analog in Western jurisprudence, and that's called public trust law. And so the lens that we bring to all these Great Lakes issues and threats and solutions is trying to figure out how is it that we ensure that these waters are protected. And there are some very powerful ways that we can do that as citizens, because the states in our country, they are the sovereign protectors of our public navigable waters. And then as citizens, we have a the states have the fiduciary role, and then citizens can hold our leaders accountable and make sure that our leaders are protecting the paramount interests of the waters over private interests. So a concrete example of that is Line 5, which is an issue that we've been working on for over 7 years. And the state of Michigan, in this case, is the protector of the Great Lakes and all of the navigable waters for fishing and swimming and drinking water and commerce. And back in 1953, when Enbridge came to the state of Michigan, they said, we want to put this oil pipeline on public trust. Well, they said we want to just put it through the Straits of Mackinac. It was the shortest way to transport Canadian oil from Canada, going back to Canada, and then it goes to Sarnia, Ontario. So at that time, the state of Michigan did not have, we had common law, but we didn't have any statute. And that actually came 2 years later, called the Great Lakes Submerged Lands Act. So the Michigan legislature had to pass a special law to allow this pipeline to rest on public lands and waters. And what we have been trying to do for many, many years is to educate both the state leaders that they have a primary duty to protect the water over the private interests of Enbridge. And that's because the private activity, in this case, the transport of oil through a pipeline, is substantially likely to harm and pollute one of the most important ecological areas, ecosystems on the planet. Flow and many others, we've, for years documented the economic impact on, what an oil spill would do to the treaty fishing rights, to property damage, to, all the natural resource damage, to all the drinking water supplies. If you have an oil spill, the million tourists who go to Mackinac Island every year can't get on boats, and the people on Mackinac Island can't drink the water. So in a nutshell, I'll just sum that up. It's that the state of Michigan is the landlord, in essence, of these public trust waters and bottomlands, and Enbridge is just a tenant, and they have failed to uphold their side of the bargain. They're not being prudent. They are not following the conditions in terms of the easement. And so we are asking the governor to revoke the easement that allows Enbridge and the pipeline to occupy our waters. And actually, Chris, if it's appropriate, we want to let everybody know that we have calls to action that, we'd like to share with you. And I don't know if we're going to share the screen or at what point, but please just know that, we just don't want to be talking heads here, that all of our work, we intend to translate into empowerment for citizens and, and our communities to protect these Great Lakes. So, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Great, thank you so much. Should we go back to that slide, Liz? Or did you want to work through any of the other slides you had there, or?
Sure, we can talk about other things. Let's see. Ben, if we could go back to those slides. So this is the first one. This is really important. So if you can, please sign this petition. It really matters. Your voice matters. Don't ever forget that. The more politicians hear from their constituents about what matters, particularly water issues in this Great Lakes state of Michigan, the more that we can really change the conversation and focus on long-term protection. So I encourage you to sign that petition, and then go to our website for more facts on Line 5. I guess I'll just say one other thing on this issue, Chris, is that right now there are two avenues that citizens really need to be engaged on. I'm looking for my other book here. So there are a couple of really important upcoming dates. So currently, there's a lawsuit where the Attorney General for the state of Michigan, Dana Nessel, has sued Enbridge to revoke the easement. And now that's why we're asking the governor to join her action and get the Department of Natural Resources, who has title to those lands, to join as well. And then we have the administrative side of things. So Enbridge is also, as many of you know, trying to build a tunnel under the Great Lakes. And they, in order to do that, first of all, they have to get authorization to build on public trust lands under the Great Lakes. We at Flow do not believe that they have ever secured the proper authorization, because the legal agreements back in 2018 that were executed under Governor Snyder never did a public trust review. And that's, very looking, saying what are the impacts and are there other alternatives, feasible and prudent alternatives to building a tunnel. Neither of those things have done. And so this month, there are going to be hearings with the Department of Eagle to construct the tunnel. And also there are permit hearings and conversations in the Michigan Public Service Commission, and they are responsible for siting the pipeline in the tunnel under the Great Lakes. So go to our website, contact us, and sign up for our newsletter so you can, stay actively involved, make public comments, and we would love to hear from you and your thoughts. So that's one thing. And then, Chris, do you want to talk about other ways to get involved on other Great Lakes issues?
Sure.
Okay.
I just wanted to highlight too this public trust doctrine that you were sharing about. That was a new concept to me when I was first getting into this work, and actually I believe it was one of the Clean Water Campaign featured interviews that we did, where you were actually our guest, and Seth talked to you. That was the first time that I really dove into that concept. And while folks are going to the Flow website, please check out just a wonderful resource, just really going in depth with that concept. Feels like such a powerful, transformative approach to this work, that in an era where corporate control over just about anything is so predominant, to really encourage our policymakers and our leaders, elected leaders, to honor the public over the private interests. So thanks so much for Liz for highlighting all of that. So let's see here. So Clean Water Campaign this year has really been oriented towards our podcast, the State of Water podcast, and continuing kind of our focus to lift up storytelling and use music to amplify the good work around mobilizing around clean water, organizing and activism across the state. We've used this podcast, used this platform to showcase a lot of the voices of frontline leaders across the state, along with some musicians, artists that a lot of the Harvest community will know and love. Thought just take this moment to just share a couple quotes from recent podcasts that just really resonated and inspired me. You can find State of Water on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, and we love to hear from folks on what's moving them, what's inspiring them, as well as any other leaders within the clean water movement who they'd like to hear more from. Seth Bernard has been doing most of the interviews, and our podcast producer, editor, mastermind, Dan Rickabis, who I think actually is on the music stage right now, has been just doing a wonderful job bringing these stories out over the last year or so. So anyways, from the last couple episodes, Monica Lewis Patrick, who's a great, just a wonderful leader based in Detroit with We the People of Detroit, really moving episode, just speaking to the power of beloved community, bringing that passion that you were talking about, Liz, into this work. Quote from her from the podcast: "This is not the end for us, but hopefully it's the beginning of reuniting humanity under the banner of belovedness." Speaking so powerfully to the water shutoffs that have been a real quality of life or death issue for a lot of the residents in Detroit. I know Flo just recently shared a piece from another leader based in Detroit, Abdul El Sayed, speaking to this time of pandemic, speaking for the need for equity based in these water issues, access to water, access to clean, affordable water. When the first public health directive in this time of pandemic is to wash your hands. What do you do when you don't have access to water? How powerfully heartbreaking and revelatory is that for the need for a different approach to how we treat water access? Another episode spotlighted Naria Sharif of Flint Rising from Flint. Quote from her: "If we can spend billions of dollars on war, and then we're not spending that level to invest in our people, our priorities are totally jacked up." And speaking from someone in Flint who has experienced that travesty of how we orient and what we prioritize public private interest profits over the health and well-being of citizens. Oh, so many good ones here that I pulled out. I'll highlight one more here of a beloved Harvest artist, Peter Madcat Ruth. Really wonderful interview conversation with him. He's such a lover of water and brings such a unique, creative, spiritual perspective to his relationship. He said, "Nature has a way of healing itself, but we have to give nature a chance." So really encourage folks to check out the podcast. We'll be sharing more episodes here in the next couple months leading up to the election, as well as some special videos and guests of hopefully bringing that heart space. I loved how you articulated that, Liz. Really inviting the artist community to show up in the ways that we can to support this work, because it's truly heart and soul kind of work, and that's an important thing to lift up, as well as all the policy and the organizing nuts and bolts.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for doing that extraordinary work, and thank you to Monica and Naira and Madcat. They're all incredible people who are water warriors, and it's a perfect segue to talk about kind of where we are in Michigan. I mean, It's 2020, right?
Yep.
And in the last decade, we've had some of the worst water disasters in the nation, just as you alluded to. And these water disasters are informing all of the work that we're doing into, environmental justice and equity and racial justice work, because water is life. Water is that centering piece that is at it changes everything. And it, as our founder Jim Olson at Flow says, if you put water at the center and at the heart of anything you do, you're going to make great decisions about everything else. If you make good decisions about how you protect water for farming, you're going to have great outcomes. Same thing for housing or transportation or energy or, or just or just making sure that everybody has access to safe, affordable, clean water. It is the most imperative thing that any society can give its people. And
I love that. That's such a wonderful quote, wonderful perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I love to study history. I think we can learn so much from it. But you think about, how humans settled. The first thing they had to figure out is how do they get access to water and how do they get rid of the waste? And the Romans really put those wheels in motion, as did all the other cultures, the most important cultures that have ever formed here on the planet. And sadly, in Michigan, we have, a lot of things have really been going wrong. So I want to bring people back to kind of 2013, 2014. Several things were happening. We had, it really first started with the switch of the Flint River, the water in Flint from the Detroit system to the Flint River in 2014. And that crisis, exposed several really important things, not only to Michigan, but to the nation writ large, which was the unbelievable disaster in water infrastructure and how our water infrastructure is crumbling. And secondly, the structural racism that led to the just inexcusable failure of both the federal and the state governments to protect a community, largely a Black community in the United States, from lead poisoning. And when the suffering of the Flint residents just continued, and then we had our next crisis that was already in the making, which was the Detroit water shutoffs, where year after year there were thousands of households who had their water shut off. And for most of us who just turn on the tap water and you pay your water bill, you don't really think about it. But for people who experience water insecurity, not being able to have water in your house leads to all sorts of terrible economic outcomes, including liens placed on your house, children being moved into foster care, your inability to hold a job, all sorts of just very dire circumstances that are life-threatening for a community, not to mention all the public health issues. And of course, wash your hands in a global pandemic is absolutely impossible if you don't have access to safe, affordable water. So we had this Flint crisis, we had the Detroit crisis, and then at the same time in 2016, this multinational corporation, Nestle, was coming back. This is the second time. Jim Olson, our founder and environmental lawyer of 40 plus years representing Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation, and the whole 9-year battle had happened, and it was very clear that you could not pump water at levels greater than 125 gallons per minute without drying up these headwater creeks. So Nestle is coming again, and they come back to the state of Michigan, and they say, we want to actually pump at 400 gallons per minute, and we're only going to pay $200 a year. Well, I do want to give a huge shout out to Garrison Ellis at MLive, who was the journalist who really sounded the alarm bell, saying, are you guys all commenting on these, making public comments? And with that warning and very close collaboration with the tribes and tribal consultations, we were able to extend the period of time for over 5 months. And because of the national leadership and coordination, where we worked with groups, even in Canada, we were able to submit 80,000 comments, public comments, to the DEQ that oversaw that permit. And that was that was like a tidal shift, in this arena, where the public was saying, this is outrageous, that, this company comes in, they take our water, and meanwhile, you have people in Michigan, residents who are suffering. They are being asked to pay $200 a month for water that's poisoned, that they can't afford, and nor do they want it. And it's creating this ironic dependency on bottled water. And so I will tell you, Chris, that one of the most transformational moments for me and for Jim and so many others is when we were in Big Rapids testifying before the DEQ in April of 2017. There were hundreds of people from Flint and Detroit, each making and articulating in the most beautiful, passionate way, where is the justice? Where is the equity? And why is this state, the Great Lakes state of Michigan, not protecting and ensuring that everybody has access to safe, affordable water? And the callousness of what happened is where the state, that forum did not allow for a dialogue. But the state of Michigan never had a dialogue with its people to say, you know what, this is wrong. This has got to change. And we as a state are going to prioritize making sure everybody, all the 10 million people who live in the state, have water. And we're not going to just give our water away to Nestle for $200 a year. So for me, I think that moment really crystallized in Michigan's future what it had to do, because the conversations about water need to include everybody. We're talking about rural people who have massive septic pollution. We're talking about tribal, indigenous folks on their lands, people in urban centers. And then, of course, we had PFAS and the extraordinary contamination. And I'll just say one last thing on a positive note. Because of the tragedies around Flint and Detroit, I believe it's one of the reasons that Michigan moved so quickly to look at the PFAS contamination and put in actual standards to protect our residents. And we are the first state to have the most protective, human health based standards, and Michigan needs to lead like that more often. And we did it in the past, and I know we can have that visionary ability to do it again in the future.
Yes, thank you so much, Liz. I love that lifting up of that story of that Nestle hearing. That's something that I've come to understand with this work, that I never really had thought about before in the way that has become so real for me in the last couple of years is this needs to be justice work. This needs to be work rooted in equity. This needs to be work that is lifting up our shared humanity and really lifts up our common story and our common need for clean, safe, affordable drinking water, whether we're in a small country town, whether we're in the city, whether we're in Traverse City, whether we're in Detroit, whether we're in Grand Rapids, Benton Harbor. This is essential. This is essential. As the word is thrown around so much these days, this is as essential as it gets. Water is life.
Absolutely.
I know. Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, no, and I'm so glad that you mentioned Benton Harbor and there are many cities in Michigan that continue to suffer. Benton Harbor, Romulus, Hamtramck, Parchment, Houghton, Village of Lawrence, and Village of Beverly Hills, for example, all of those communities have had lead levels that have that continue to exceed EPA levels. And we know that any level of lead is unacceptable. And so I'll just say very quickly that some of the work that Flow is, I mean, this is kind of the heart of the work that we're involved right now, is looking at how do we fund and finance our water infrastructure that is going to lead to these equitable outcomes, so that there are water affordability plans in place, that there are funds to address the lead replacement, that address additional contamination, that brings back the balance so that we can trust our water, especially in those communities that have suffered the most. And this is really hard work. One of the pieces that we're really lifting up is thinking about this model legislation that would be a public water justice framework that would protect water as a public good. It would affirm the state's sovereignty, would create a royalty and licensing scheme so that bottled water, both from public supplies and groundwater, would pay into a trust fund that would generate enough revenue to address these very serious and costly issues, because as you know, the federal government has really been underinvesting in water infrastructure for the past 40 years, and that has led us to the brink of this crisis.
Thank you so much, Liz. I know we've just got a couple minutes left here for our slot here. I know we could keep talking for hours. And I just peeked over at the YouTube stream, and I'm not seeing any questions come in yet. Thanks for all the comments and folks who are tuning in. Thought we could close just by inviting folks to know how they can keep in touch and if there's any last call to actions. I know that speaking back to 2018, that organizing and energy that for around water issues that was happening during that campaign season felt really transformative to the conversation of how citizens not only were engaged, but also how we were forcing the candidates to really take a stand on these issues. And so I'd really encourage folks to continue to look to organizations doing the work in your local communities and across the state. We the People of Michigan, their People's Agenda that they've created recently really lifts up a beautiful framework for engaging this election season. I know that Clean Water Action Michigan always pulls together some endorsements around clean water candidates that they've vetted. And I believe that Michigan Climate Action Network has some great voter resources too. So really encourage folks to engage in this season in the ways that you can to lift up the public trust, to lift up our waters. And please reach out to us at Title Track Clean Water Campaign if you have any questions or want to engage our work. We're going to be kicking off some fun kind of creative artistic programming here in the coming weeks and months to go along with our racial justice work. And please check out the State of Water podcast. If you want to reach me, Chris, at titletrackmichigan.org, and Facebook, Instagram is always great too. Liz, you want to give folks a way to keep in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I also lift up some other organizations who are doing fabulous work, including Michigan League of Conservation Voters, People's Water Board, and so many others. I mean, it's the good news is there are great resources out there, and we are blessed to be working with such passionate people who are really dedicated to systemic change here in our state. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm Liz at flowforwater.org. And then our website is forloveofwater.org. And follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, and just keep finding yourself inspired. Keep, never give up. We are in this for life.
Always a pleasure to connect with you, Liz. Thank you so much. Happy harvest, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you
to
so
all
much,
the
Chris.
all the
Thanks
volunteers,
for a great,
all the volunteers and staff and musicians and artists who make this happen. And hopefully we'll gather in person next September.
I hope so.
All right, I'm not even sure what's coming up next. I believe another title track session with the Northern Michigan E3, the Anti-Racism Task Force. They've just been doing really inspired work. So please stay tuned for that. If you're hopping between the workshop and the music stages, and please support the farm and harvest gathering if you're able. All that information I know is at earthworkharvestgathering.com. Take care.